Some people wear their power so quietly, the world mistakes it for weakness. A woman drives home on a quiet Memphis road. Blue lights flash behind her. Two officers approach with aggression from the first second. They bark orders, shine flashlights in her face. When she reaches for her phone to record, they drag her out of the car, slam her against the hood, cuff her while hurling words no person should ever hear. Her name is Seagal. She is an attorney, a former civil rights litigator, and her dashcam is live streaming every second to her husband's phone. Her husband is Seagal, 6'4", 250 pounds, Aikido master with a badge of his own. He arrives in under 4 minutes. But what happens when the woman they underestimated decides an apology will never be enough? If this story satisfies you, like and subscribe for more. Now here's the thing about Seagal. People see the movies. They see the black leather jacket and the squint and they think they know the man. They don't. What they don't see is the years he spent in Japan. Real training. Real discipline. The kind of patience that turns a dangerous man into a controlled one. And on this night, driving 80 miles an hour through quiet Memphis streets, that control was being tested like never before. He had watched the live stream for exactly 11 seconds before he moved. 11 seconds of two officers manhandling his wife. 11 seconds of her voice staying calm while theirs got louder. That was enough. He didn't call 911. He didn't call a lawyer. He grabbed his keys, his old reserve deputy badge, and he drove. Keisha, meanwhile, was doing what Keisha always did under pressure. She was thinking. Face down on the hood of her own car, wrists locked behind her back, she was already building the case. She noted the time. She noted which officer grabbed her left arm hard enough to leave a bruise. She noted that neither one had stated a reason for the stop. Not speeding. Not a broken taillight. Nothing. And she noted the slur. Officer number 2, the shorter one with the buzz cut, had leaned in close and said it low, like he thought the wind would carry it away. But the dashcam didn't care about wind. The dashcam caught everything. Now get this. The taller officer, a man named Deputy Ray Brolin, had been with the Shelby County Department for 14 years. 14 years without a single excessive force complaint on his official record. But talk to the people in the neighborhoods south of Lamar Avenue and you'd hear a different story. Brolin was known. Not famous. Known. The kind of known that makes mothers pull their children inside when a patrol car rolls by. His partner, Deputy Carl Deckard, had only 3 years on the job. But 3 years under Brolin was like dog years. He had learned fast. Learned that certain people in certain cars on certain roads didn't get the same courtesy. Learned that complaints from those people rarely went anywhere. Learned that the system had a short memory when it wanted to. So when Seagal asked for a badge number, Deckard laughed. Actually laughed. Because in his experience that request meant nothing. It was noise. Background noise from someone who didn't understand how things worked out here after dark. He was about to learn how wrong he was. Steven's truck came around the corner fast. Headlights cutting through the dark like 2 white fists. He pulled up 20 feet behind the patrol car and stepped out. Now, believe me when I tell you this. Steven Seagal at 6'4", 250 pounds, stepping out of a vehicle at night with that look on his face is not something you forget. It's not something you prepare for in the academy. Brolin's hand went to his belt. Instinct. 14 years of instinct. Steven stopped. He held both hands open at his sides. Palms forward. Fingers spread. He knew what a black man approaching 2 aggressive officers at night looked like through their eyes. He knew the math. He knew how fast things could go from bad to permanent. "That's my wife," he said. Not loud. Not soft. Just clear. Brolin squinted. Deckard tilted his head like a dog hearing a pitch it doesn't recognize. "Sir, step back to your vehicle," Brolin said. "That's my wife," Steven said again. "And I'm a reserve deputy with the Jefferson Parish Sheriff's Office. Badge number 447. Now take your hands off her." There was a pause. The kind of pause that lives between what a man wants to do and what he knows he should do. Brolin looked at Deckard. Deckard looked at Keisha. Keisha looked straight into the dashcam. And she smiled. Not a warm smile. Not a relieved smile. The kind of smile a chess player gives when the opponent moves exactly where she wanted them to. Brolin uncuffed her. Slowly. Like the slower he moved, the less it counted. Deckard took a step back. Then another. Stephen didn't move an inch. He stood there, hands still open, watching every motion like a man reading a contract he already knew was fraudulent. Keisha rubbed her wrists. She looked at Brolin. She looked at Deckard. Then she looked at Stephen. "I got all of it," she said. 3 words. And those 3 words were the beginning of the end for the Shelby County Sheriff's Department. They just didn't know it yet. They drove home in separate vehicles. Stephen followed Keisha the whole way, watched her taillights like a man watching a heartbeat on a monitor. When they pulled into the driveway, Keisha didn't go inside right away. She sat in her car for a full 2 minutes. Engine off. Hands on the wheel. Stephen waited. He knew better than to rush her. When she finally stepped out, her eyes were dry. Her jaw was set. And the first thing she said was not what he expected. "I need the dashcam footage backed up to 3 separate drives tonight." Not, "I'm scared." Not, "Are you okay?" The woman had just been thrown onto the hood of her own car by 2 armed men, and her first instinct was to preserve evidence. That tells you everything you need to know about Keisha Seagal. Inside, Stephen pulled the SD card from the dashcam and started copying files. Keisha sat at the kitchen table with a legal pad and started writing. Timestamps, descriptions, exact words used. She wrote down the slur. She underlined it twice. She wrote down the badge interaction, the refusal to provide a reason for the stop, the force used during the cuffing. Every detail, filed in her memory like a cabinet she'd been building her whole career. Now here's where the story turns. Because if it had just been about Keisha, this would have been a lawsuit and a settlement and a headline that lasted maybe 2 news cycles. But Keisha was not the kind of person who fought for herself alone. Never had been. She opened her laptop and started searching. Shelby County Sheriff's Department. Complaints. Excessive force. Racial profiling. And what she found made her stomach drop. There were dozens of incidents. Not rumors. Documented cases. A 19-year-old college student pulled over and beaten so badly, he lost hearing in his left ear. A grandmother handcuffed during a welfare check because she reached toward her pocket. A father of 3 tossed in his own driveway for asking why officers were on his property. All of them black. All in the same jurisdiction. And in nearly every case, the complaint was either dismissed or buried in an internal review that went nowhere. Believe me, Keisha had seen corruption before. She had worked civil rights cases in Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia. She knew what institutional racism looked like when it wore a uniform. But this was different. This was organized. The same names kept appearing in complaint after complaint. Brolin, Deckard, and a third name she hadn't heard before. Sheriff Leonard Tate. Tate had run the department for 22 years. 22 years. Elected 5 times. Unopposed in the last 3. The kind of man who shook hands at church on Sunday and signed off on brutality reports on Monday. His department had a citizen review board, but Keisha found out within 30 minutes of research that 4 of the 5 board members were either former deputies or relatives of current ones. The system wasn't broken. The system was built this way. She turned the laptop toward Stephen. He read for a long time. Then he leaned back and said, "So what do you want to do?" "I want to burn it down," she said. "Legally." Stephen nodded. He understood legal. But he also understood something else. Men like Brolin and Tate didn't respond to subpoenas the way normal people did. They responded to pressure. The kind you feel before you see it coming. "You handle the law," he said. "I'll handle the rest." Keisha looked at him. "The rest has to stay legal too, Stephen." "It will," he said. "But legal doesn't mean gentle." That night, Keisha emailed the dashcam footage to 3 people. her former law partner in Washington, a journalist at the Memphis Commercial Appeal, and the regional director of the ACLU. She blind copied herself on every message. Then she backed up the emails to a flash drive, sealed it in an envelope, and mailed it to her sister in Atlanta. Now, if you're thinking this sounds like a woman preparing for war, you're right. But what Keisha didn't know yet was that the war had already started without her. But that night, the house was quiet. Stephen checked the locks twice, the way he always did. Keisha poured herself a glass of water and sat by the window. The street outside was still. No sirens, no flashing lights, just the sound of crickets and the low hum of the refrigerator. She took a breath. For the first time in hours, her shoulders dropped. Stephen sat down beside her. Neither of them spoke. It felt, for just a moment, like the worst was behind them, like the footage would do the work, like the system, once exposed, would correct itself, like maybe they could go to bed tonight and wake up tomorrow in a world that worked the way it was supposed to. It was a reasonable thing to believe, and it was completely wrong. At 6 in the morning, Keisha's phone rang. It was the journalist from the Memphis Commercial Appeal, a woman named Dana Price, and the first words out of her mouth were, "They already know. Now get this." Before Keisha had even finished her coffee, the story had flipped. Sheriff Tate had called a press conference for 8 o'clock that morning. Not to respond to the dashcam footage. No, to get ahead of it. He stood behind a podium with the department seal behind him and the American flag beside him, and he told the cameras a story. A very different story. He said that on the night in question, Deputies Brolin and Deckard had conducted a routine traffic stop after observing a vehicle swerving across lane lines. He said the driver became combative, refused to comply, attempted to reach for an object. He said the officers followed department protocol to the letter. And then he played video of his own. Body camera footage. Edited. Cut to start only after Keisha had already been pulled from the car. In the clip, she appeared to be resisting. Her voice was raised. One frame showed her arm swinging in a way that, out of context, looked aggressive. What the clip did not show was the 12 minutes before. The flashlights, the commands, the hands through the window, the slur. All of that had been removed. Surgically. Tate looked into the camera and said the department would be filing a formal complaint against Keisha Seagal for obstruction and resisting arrest. Then he said something that made Keisha's blood go cold. He said, "We are also aware that a former reserve deputy from another jurisdiction was present and may have interfered with an active detention. That matter is also under review." He meant Stephen. He was coming for both of them. Dana Price told Keisha the paper's legal team had gotten nervous. The edited body camera footage muddied the waters just enough. The story wasn't killed, but it was delayed, pushed to the following week at the earliest pending further verification. In journalism, a delay like that is often a death sentence for a story. Keisha knew it. Dana knew it. And Tate definitely knew it. Keisha hung up the phone and sat very still. Stephen was standing in the kitchen doorway. He had heard enough. "They doctored the footage," he said. "Of course they did. So we release ours." "Not yet," Keisha said. "And this is important. This is the moment where Keisha made a choice that most people in her position would not make. She held the dashcam footage back. She did not post it online. She did not send it to another outlet. She wanted to file a federal civil rights complaint first. She wanted the footage entered into an official legal record before it went viral, because she knew that once it hit the internet, Tate's lawyers would call it tampered. They would claim it was edited too. It would become a he-said-she-said war of clips. But if the footage was entered into a federal filing first, authenticated and timestamped, it became evidence. Real evidence. The kind that holds up. It was a smart decision. But smart decisions take time. And time was something they were about to run out of. That same afternoon, Stephen drove to the hardware store on Union Avenue. When he came back to the truck, he noticed a sedan parked 3 spaces behind him. Dark blue, tinted windows, government plates, pulled out when he pulled out, turned when he turned. It followed him for 11 blocks before peeling off near a gas station on Poplar. Stephen didn't say anything to Keisha right away. He wanted to be sure. So the next morning he drove to the grocery store. Same sedan. Same plates. This time it parked across the street and stayed there for 40 minutes. Stephen wrote down the plate number and ran it through a contact he still had in Louisiana law enforcement. The car was registered to the Shelby County Sheriff's Office. They were being watched. Now believe me, Steven Seagal has been in situations before. He has walked into rooms that most people would run from. But this was different. This was not a bar fight or a movie set. This was a coordinated effort by a sitting sheriff to intimidate, discredit, and silence his wife. And that changed something inside Stephen. He stopped thinking like a man trying to keep the peace. He started thinking like a man preparing to end one. He called a friend. A man named James Dalton. Former military. Private security contractor. Licensed investigator in the state of Tennessee. Stephen asked him one question. Can you find out what Tate is hiding? Dalton said, Brother, men like that are always hiding something. Give me 48 hours. Keisha filed the federal complaint that evening. She sent it to the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division by certified mail and encrypted email. She included the full, unedited dashcam footage, her written timeline, medical photographs of the bruising on her wrists, and a list of 31 prior complaints she had compiled against the Shelby County Department. 31 complaints, some going back 15 years, none of which had resulted in discipline. She sealed the envelope, drove to the post office herself, and watched the clerk stamp it. Then she sat in her car in the parking lot and allowed herself one moment. Just one. Her hands were shaking, not from fear, from anger. The kind of anger that sits so deep it feels like a second heartbeat. When she got home, Stephen was on the porch. He looked at her and said, Dalton found something. Already. It wasn't hard. Tate's been sloppy. What Dalton had found was a bank account. An account linked to the Sheriff's Department Benevolent Fund. Over the past 10 years, more than $600,000 had moved through that account. But the money didn't go to the families of fallen officers. It didn't go to community programs. It went to 3 places. A property management company owned by Tate's brother-in-law. A consulting firm with no employees and no website. And a personal checking account under the name Leonard Tate Jr., the sheriff's son. This was no longer just a case about a traffic stop. This was systemic corruption backed by stolen money. And Keisha had just kicked the door open. Stephen looked at her across the porch and said, Still want to keep it legal? She didn't blink. Legal is how we win. 48 hours later, the federal complaint landed. And it landed hard. The Department of Justice opened a preliminary inquiry into the Shelby County Sheriff's Department. A team from the Civil Rights Division was assigned to review the dashcam footage, the prior complaints, and the financial irregularities flagged in Keisha's filing. This was not a local matter anymore. This was federal. And federal meant that Sheriff Leonard Tate could not make a phone call and make it disappear. But Tate tried anyway. Now here's the thing about men who've held power for 22 years. They don't believe the walls can fall. They've seen threats before. Journalists, activists, county auditors with clipboards. And every time the walls held. So when Tate heard about the federal inquiry, he did what he always did. He called his attorney. He called his contacts at the state capitol. And he called Deputy Brolin into his office. What happened in that meeting? Dalton's investigation would later reveal through a recording made by a department secretary who had seen enough. Tate told Brolin to go to the Seagal residence. Not in uniform, not on duty, just to talk, man to man. The message was simple. Drop the complaint. Accept the department's version of events. And in exchange, the obstruction charge against Keisha would be quietly dismissed. Tate called it a professional courtesy. Any reasonable person would call it witness tampering. Brolin drove to the house on a Tuesday evening. He parked on the street, walked up the driveway in jeans and a polo shirt like he was visiting a neighbor, and he knocked on the door. Stephen opened it. Now believe me, the look on Brolin's face when he saw Steven Seagal standing in that doorway is something I wish the whole world could have seen. Because Brolin had done this before. He had knocked on doors in black neighborhoods and delivered quiet threats dressed up as friendly advice. He had leaned on people who didn't have lawyers, people who didn't have cameras, people who didn't have a 6'4" Aikido master standing between them and the man who hurt them. This time was different. Stephen didn't say a word at first. He just stood there, filling the doorframe, arms at his sides, eyes locked. Brolin started his pitch. Something about misunderstandings. Something about how these things can get blown out of proportion. Something about how it would be better for everyone if they could just move past it. Stephen let him finish. Every word. Then he said, "Are you done?" Brolin nodded. "Good," Stephen said. "Now I'm going to say something and you're going to listen to every word. You put your hands on my wife. You called her something I won't repeat. You dragged her out of her own vehicle on a public road for no legal reason. And now you're standing on my porch trying to make it go away." He stepped forward. One step. Just one. But that one step made Brolin move back too. "Here's what's going to happen," Stephen continued. "My wife filed a federal complaint. That complaint is going to be investigated. And when it is, they're going to find the footage. All of it. Not the version your boss cut up for television. The real one. And then they're going to look at the money, the benevolent fund, the shell companies, the payments to Tate's family. And when that happens, Ray, your name is going to be on every single page." Brolin's face changed. Not anger. Something worse. Recognition. The kind of look a man gets when he realizes the ground he's standing on has been hollow the whole time. "You've got two choices," Stephen said. "Walk away right now and start thinking about how you're going to cooperate with federal investigators. Or stay on this porch and find out what happens when you threaten a man's family twice." Brolin left. Didn't say another word. Got in his car and drove away. Stephen watched until the taillights disappeared. Then he went back inside, sat down next to Keisha and said, "He came to make a deal." "I know," she said. She had been standing behind the hallway wall the entire time, recording on her phone. Every word. Every threat disguised as an olive branch. Another piece of evidence. Another nail. This is the part of the story where I need you to understand something. Stephen could have handled that differently. There was a time in his life when a man showing up at his door with that kind of energy would have left on a stretcher. But the Steven Seagal standing in that doorway was not the man from 30 years ago. He had learned something that most fighters never learn. That the most powerful thing you can do in a confrontation is give the other person enough room to destroy themselves. And Brolin had just done exactly that. If the story is keeping you with me, take a second and hit subscribe. It helps more than you think. And we're not done yet. Keisha played the recording back that night. She listened to it 3 times. Then she added it to the federal filing as a supplemental exhibit. Witness intimidation, attempted coercion, all captured in Brolin's own voice, on the Seagal's own property. The walls were cracking, and Tate didn't even know it yet. 3 weeks later, the Department of Justice announced a full pattern or practice investigation into the Shelby County Sheriff's Department. Not a preliminary review, not a fact-finding visit, a full federal investigation. The kind that comes with subpoena power, forensic accountants, and investigators who do not answer to local politics. Keisha watched the announcement on her laptop at the kitchen table. Stephen stood behind her with his hand on her shoulder. Neither of them celebrated. They had been in this fight long enough to know that announcements are not outcomes. But the announcement did something that no lawsuit or newspaper article could have done on its own. It gave people permission to speak. Within the first week, 14 new complaints were filed against the Shelby County Department. Not through Keisha, not through the ACLU, through the DOJ's own intake line. People who had stayed quiet for years. People who had been afraid. A woman in Whitehaven who said Brolin had slammed her teenage son against a patrol car for skateboarding in a parking lot. A man in Fraser who said Deckard had confiscated $200 from his wallet during a traffic stop and never filed a report. A church pastor in Orange Mound who said he had been pulled over 17 times in 4 years. 17 times. Never once charged with anything. The stories kept coming. And every single one of them matched the pattern Keisha had identified in her original filing. The same officers, the same neighborhoods, The same silence from the department when complaints were made. It was like pulling a thread on a sweater and watching the whole thing unravel. Now here's what happened to the people on the other side. Deputy Carl Deckard resigned before the investigation reached him. Quietly. No press conference. No statement. He turned in his badge on a Friday morning and was gone by lunch. People said he moved to Arkansas. Nobody followed up. Nobody cared enough to. Deputy Ray Brolin did not go quietly. He hired an attorney. He gave an interview to a local radio station where he called the investigation a political witch hunt. He said Keisha Seagal had an agenda. He said Steven Seagal had used his celebrity to influence the process. He said everything except the truth. But the truth has a way of arriving whether you're ready for it or not. 2 months into the investigation, Brolin was indicted on 4 counts of civil rights violations, 2 counts of filing false reports, and 1 count of evidence tampering related to the doctored body camera footage. His attorney negotiated. Brolin pleaded guilty to 2 of the lesser charges and was sentenced to 18 months in federal prison. He served 14. And Sheriff Leonard Tate, the man who had run that department like a personal kingdom for 22 years, the man who shook hands and signed off on brutality in the same afternoon. Tate held on longer than anyone expected. He denied everything. He challenged the investigation in court. He gave speeches about law enforcement being under attack. He wrapped himself in the flag and the badge and dared anyone to take them from him. The forensic accountants took them. The audit of the benevolent fund revealed $643,000 in misallocated funds. Money that was supposed to help the families of officers had been funneled into 3 shell entities controlled by Tate's relatives. His brother-in-law, his son, and a cousin who ran a landscaping company that had never mowed a single lawn. Tate was removed from office by court order. He was charged with embezzlement, fraud, and obstruction of a federal investigation. His trial lasted 9 days. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to 7 years. The Shelby County Sheriff's Department was placed under a federal consent decree. That means the DOJ now oversees its operations. New hiring practices, new training requirements, new accountability measures, body cameras that cannot be edited by the officers who wear them. A citizen review board made up of actual citizens. Not deputies, not relatives. Real people from the community the department is supposed to serve. Now, I want to tell you about one more moment, because this is the one that matters most. 6 months after the consent decree, Keisha was invited to speak at a community meeting in Orange Mound, the same neighborhood where the pastor had been pulled over 17 times. The room was a church basement, folding chairs, fluorescent lights, maybe 80 people. Keisha stood at the front with no podium and no microphone. She didn't need one. The room was that quiet. She told them what happened to her on that Memphis road. She told them about the flashlights and the hands and the cuffs and the word that deputy had said to her. She told them about the dashcam, about the federal filing, about Brolin showing up on her porch. And then she told them something she had not said publicly before. She said that when she was lying face down on the hood of her car that night, with her arms pinned behind her back and the cold metal against her cheek, she had a thought, a single, clear thought. She thought about every person who had been in that exact position and didn't have a dashcam, didn't have a law degree, didn't have a husband who could show up in 4 minutes, didn't have anyone coming at all. And she said that thought was the reason she fought. Not the anger, not the humiliation, the thought of everyone who couldn't fight back. The room was silent. Then someone in the back started clapping. Then another person. Then the whole room. Not loud. Not a standing ovation. Just steady, grateful applause from people who had waited a long time to be heard. Steven was there that night. He stood in the back of the room with his arms folded. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. When Keisha finished, he walked to the car, opened her door, and waited for her to get in. They drove home the same way they had driven home that first night, in separate lanes of silence. But this time the silence was different. It wasn't shock. It wasn't fear. It was the kind of quiet that comes after something has been set right. Not perfect, not finished, but right. When they got home, Keisha sat in her car again, just like she had that first night. Hands on the wheel, engine off. But this time she wasn't building a case in her head. She was letting it go. Not the memory, the weight. She had carried it for months. The footage, the filings, the threats, the counter-narratives. The nights spent wondering if she had done the right thing. And now it was done. Not because the world was fixed, but because she had done what she could. And what she could do turned out to be enough. Stephen knocked on the window. She looked up. He didn't say anything, just held up 2 mugs of tea. She smiled. Not the chess player smile from the night of the stop. A real one, tired and earned and warm. She got out of the car. They sat on the porch. The street was quiet. Crickets again. That same low hum. And for the second time in this story, it felt like peace. But this time it was real. Some people wear their power so quietly, the world mistakes it for weakness. The world made that mistake with Seagal. It only had to make it once.